Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Glad to have you back. I've got Matthew Maffey in the studio today, head of our marketing here at Tower Leadership. Asked to join me. I needed some energy in the studio today, so glad to have you.
Get a little banter. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on this, and we were talking earlier. Our production team put together a little promo for the Dental Wealth Podcast, and I feel like I just heard "Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast" 1,000 times in my head right now. So it's great to be here. I'm excited to be on the show and go through some concepts that our listeners need to hear.
Well, the last few weeks I've used my lucky quarter to pick what we're going to talk about today.
The lucky quarter comes back into play.
Today I'm going to let you pick, Matthew. So you tell me what's on the minds right now. What do we need to be talking about today?
Interesting enough, lately I've heard some of your conversations when you talk with some of our, higher level sophisticated doctors, and they're having a problem right now with their schedule. It's about 6 months ago, typically dental practices, they book out about 6 months worth of treatment. And, COVID hit about 6 months ago. So they're looking at their October, they're looking ahead, and they see that their schedule's half full. What would you say to the dental practice that has a full schedule? Like, what are some things that they could be doing now or they should have been doing when everything happened?
Well, I hate to spend time on should-haves, but, it's interesting. This, you and I spoke about this a little bit, but at the last workshop we just had, we had a doctor there who started listening to this podcast. That's how he got started. Mm-hmm. And in the middle of COVID, I'm not sure how he was introduced to the podcast, but in the middle of COVID, he ends up listening to the podcast and then gets an idea from the podcast and then ends up implementing it, which ultimately.
And he just reached out. This guy is a very successful individual, and he was just looking for the next step. And he heard great things about Eric Moore. And, he heard that presence in the marketplace. And he came across the Dental Wealth Podcast. I had reached out to him. We had a conversation. I said, there's one thing you need to listen to, and it's the Dental Wealth Podcast. Eric goes through a lot of great things, especially with everything that's happening now. It's probably the best thing that you could be listening to because Eric, he deals with his own dental practice. So he's got to figure out ways to give you the information you need to, be sure you're set up for the rest of this year and this year.
I bring him up for a reason. And the reason I bring him up is because it's interesting. Back then, right, we go back to 6 months, right?
Yep.
So we go back 6 months. If we look back at 6 months, there were things I said you need to do at the time, which was one of the things I said is everybody's pulling back in marketing right now. And interestingly enough, I said, if you think about it, everyone had pulled back. And the marketplace, they say that the average that it used to take for mentions, listens, something to see, for someone to see your, advertisement,
touch points,
for someone to take action. And then it became 16, and then it became like 26. But for like a brief moment, and maybe it was 2 weeks, right? Mm-hmm. For a brief moment, it took 1. And the reason I told him to capitalize on that time is because I said, look, this is a brief moment. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is we look at opportunities. And so we start to go back and say, look, let's look at opportunities. If we do go back, we do have to always learn from something. Like, so you might be listening and going, well, that's not helpful today. Well, no, it is helpful today because actually you need to think about 2021. You need to be thinking about the fact of, and here's a question, right? You're in marketing. So, here's the thing. If we think about this, our dental practices, the vast majority, our clients are the vast majority of doctors truly re-engage back into marketing the way they need to be? I'd say no, right?
Yeah, the conversations that I have in the marketplace, it's basically, I don't know what to do. It's more so, and that, COVID or not COVID, when it comes to marketing, it's a scary subject to bring up. I remember you had the conversation at this last workshop that we had with all the clients, basically telling them they need to market. There's a certain percentage you should be putting into marketing every single month. Regardless of if it's COVID, we're out of COVID, doesn't matter. You should always be spending money in marketing. The problem is that there's hesitation, there's fear that gets involved, and they don't necessarily do anything because they're worried about they put their dollars in where the dollar's going to go. And especially now when everyone's making sure their dollar gets the most, how do they get the most out of their dollar? They're a little even more hesitant to do marketing. And, after that workshop, we had people that actually were invigorated to go marketing again. You don't really see that at the dental marketplace, people being invigorated to go to marketing.
But now's the time to be invigorated. And I would say that, look, so let me pull it back for a second. There's two things for sure. One thing absolutely for sure is that we should have been forecasting. We should have been looking ahead. Okay. But we can, there's no reason to keep beating a dead horse, but it's important to understand you've got to be forecasting. You cannot wait until the last moment. You cannot wait until the last moment to go do something. So ultimately speaking, it's important for you to look ahead. Now, it's the same thing. Let me give a different example, a different context. So, kids go back to school and then the schedule tends to slow down. I mean, not as extreme as certain industries, but dental is still cyclical. It does have swings. And so what ends up happening, if you come back and tell me September's been slow for 25 years, I would say you need a market.
Yeah.
I mean, so we got to be way out in front of that. So then if we're going to market way out in front of that, so we've got to know it's the same thing. Well, it's interesting enough. We could have looked at our calendar way out in advance and they could have done something about it. Now, here's the problem though. And I think this is one of the ultimate problems. Now, Matthew gets to hear people that call Tower Leadership that are already that are struggling. And then so Matthew's got this interesting perspective, which is the idea of hearing a doctor call up when they're in panic, when they're like you just spoke to a lady this morning who had called Tower Leadership for assistance and said, I need some help, who saw a 40% drop in revenue, who was like, okay, what do I do? And in a panic mode. And so then we look at that and say, when that starts to happen, what happens is we then go to our peers, right, which is normal, by the way. And then they all look at you and they go, my schedule is also light for October.
Exactly.
And then it tells you by when you go speak to those people and they all tell you my schedule is also bare in October, then it almost justifies not forecasting. In a sense, we're all in the same boat. So we say to ourselves, I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It
gives them a cop-out.
It
gives them a cop-out.
That's hard language, but it's kind of,
it gives. I say cop out because, when I have these conversations like you mentioned, you're having the same conversation. I mean, when you have your high-end net worth clients and they come in, you have the same conversations with them. When they go and they're having struggles and they go ask the other people in the marketplace what's going on, just like this young lady that called our office, she said the first thing she turned to, she went and asked her peers, and they all told her the exact same thing that you just did. And it doesn't matter if you're, an $800,000 practice or you're a $3 million practice like most of your clients and have large facilities. It doesn't matter. You guys have the same issues, but you got to start. What can you focus on? Can you forecast out? What do you need to do from an internal standpoint to make sure you don't have that lag? How do you basically, so what, from a peer group, who should people be, when they're going to ask those questions, who do you think they should be going to ask? So COVID hit, they're marketing, everyone else is not getting the patients in the door. Who would you recommend that they go and talk to, or who they ask questions to? So that's an interesting point. Who do you recommend?
Well, it's certainly not the people in the same boat as me, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't, if we're all drowning, asking all the same people that are drowning, what do we do to stop drowning, isn't really very helpful. I mean, so we'd have to argue that that's not, even though it makes us feel better, it's not a solution. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately we have to learn fundamentals of business. I would argue that I would be putting myself, because by the way, it's this or something else or some other, look, we'll blow back. Yeah. People that are panicked over October don't panic over October. Mm-hmm. I would tell you that, and I'll explain why in a second. But I mean, ultimately speaking, don't panic, but you got to learn business fundamentals. When you understand business fundamentals and really truly understand business fundamentals, which I'm so big on, this is why everything I teach comes from an MBA approach, which is when you learn that, you actually get excited when things like that happen, because you realize there's an opportunity in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. The truth is we should have been pushing more into marketing at a certain point when we knew exactly the lag it takes. So for instance, if it takes 35 days traditionally on a marketing investment to get a return, we call that cash conversion cycle. How long does it take from the day you put $1 into marketing before it comes back into your office? Mm-hmm. It's called a cash conversion cycle. So if you knew your cash conversion cycle and you were able to actually predict, then you would have known, hey, on August 10th, we need to put $10,000 into a marketing campaign, which would yield us results. Let's just for simplicity say September 15th, which means we'd be booking him in October. Let's just play that out. Okay. So we would have known that. So we what we do is we have these campaigns ready. We know what the forecasting needs are, and we're prepared. Now the problem is the doctor is like, when the heck am I going to do all that?
Yep.
And that's really that's truly one of the fundamental problems is like, Eric, I'm in the chair 4 days a week. When I get out of the chair, I'm exhausted. When am I going to do that? So then there has to be systems built around that. But ultimately, that's why it's not happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
It becomes a time consume.
Completely. I mean, when you start actually looking at it and go, I mean, that's really why it doesn't happen. Because if I take the same doctor, and to give everyone who's listening credit, if I take that doctor out of the chair and say 5 days a week, you just get to focus on the business all day, I would argue actually that doctor does do the marketing. I would actually argue that they do see the numbers. But they don't have, in a sense, time, right? I mean, and I would say it's not that they don't have time, they don't have systems is probably a better way to say it. And so because they don't have the systems, then ultimately it doesn't happen and no one's measuring it. And because it doesn't measure, there's no confidence around it. And so it ultimately doesn't happening. And then when you're freaking out because the sky's falling, then ultimately speaking, you go ask everybody else where the sky's falling, and then you feel better about the sky falling, and you go, shit, I'm just going to try to figure out how to get through this, and then nothing ever happens. So let's kind of flip it a little bit and say, okay, well, how do we then get in front of it now? Like, oh, Eric, this all sounds great, except for that doesn't help me.
Yeah, like, what does that mean? MBA style approach. What does that mean? I went to school to be a dentist. What do you mean by MBA style approach?
So here's what I would say for the people that are a little panicked right now. So I would not go out, first of all, and start trying to go to a cold marketplace. The cash conversion cycle in dentistry is too long. Okay. For instance, I'm recording this. It is September 22nd. Okay. Ultimately speaking, by the time this actually, I don't know when we're going to be releasing it, but let's say it's October 1st. It's too late.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think it's ultimately important for you to understand that you should have an internal marketing campaign, an internal campaign going back to people who know you, like you, and trust you. They might not have been in for a while. You can offer offers, we call them offers to get somebody to take action. Maybe it's a new service you're going to be doing. Maybe it's a new product that you have. One of the things you can do, it's kind of a little bit of a hack, is give somebody, by the way, people love the ability to, in front of their peers, have some social capital. Okay. And what I mean by social capital is, think about when you tell stories. You don't tell stories about when you woke up this morning and you put your socks on, right? There's no social capital in that, right? And we don't give people things that aren't of value, right? So so if you and I are talking, I want to talk to you about the thing that I saw online that's super cool, the movie that's super exciting. I want to talk about the sports score that, I want to, in a sense, become in our circle. I want to be able to have something that's relevant.
Yeah. That engages an audience.
Great. So in a sense, what happens is I can actually get my patients to also engage people. And the way I do that is I actually give them, people that know, like, and trust me, a gift. But I can also give them a gift to give to somebody else. In a sense, what ends up happening is if I go tell my patient who knows, likes, and trusts me to, hey, look, go tell your friends about us.
Yeah.
There's no social capital in that. Does that make sense? There's nothing to.
Is that like one of the main reasons? Like you always say, and you teach your clients, before you go into like an external marketing campaign, always look at your systems in place. Go internal first. How do we get these patients that we already have involved? Is that kind of what you're going with?
I am.
A little bit about
that?
Yeah,
because what I'm saying is that ultimately speaking, it costs so much more to acquire a patient who's never heard of you or doesn't know you. But let's assume that, that all of a sudden I have a patient who's also married. And I go back and say, the patient likes me. We'll call the patient Lisa today. Lisa likes me, likes our office, thinks we're amazing and is a raving fan. But Lisa's husband is Jim. Jim's a little skittish.
Yeah.
I've got to somehow get Jim's in. And to believe it or not, all practices have a Jim. right? There's
Old
a lot.
Jim.
Jim's
Old
been going to
Jimbo.
the same dentist forever, and Jim doesn't want to come in because Jim likes his guy, and he's been with his guy forever.
Yep.
So somehow, I've got to get Jim in the door. So I've got to somehow get Lisa motivated to get Jim in the door. Okay.
Yes.
And when I look at that and say, if I was to get, first of all, I got to get Lisa back in, right? Mm-hmm. And this is in business, it also increases what we call frequency. But if I can get Lisa to then be motivated to tell Jim, and by the way, not just Jim, but also her friends.
Yeah.
So what can I do to get Lisa to want to come back in? But not only to get Lisa to come back in, but Lisa to then communicate to her friends about why to come to our dental practice. Mm-hmm. So I might do an event. I might do a product or service for a limited time. Limited time is scarcity. Scarcity drives demand. So I might be doing something like some type of a cosmetic thing for a period of time. I might be doing a procedure opening up to so many cases. I might be willing to.
So by limited time, are you talking like a couple weeks?
Yeah, October. I mean,
Okay.
I'm saying October. I'm saying
yeah,
like
'cause
go
we're
back
trying
to.
to
Yeah.
crunch
So
down that
look, and
conversion cycle.
if you book within and I would have them book within the next. So look, with 7 days only, if you bring in a friend with you, or if you or we're going to give you this, and if you refer a friend, we're also going to give you this. Now, you have to look at each state because you can't. What happens is you cannot basically pay someone to, in a sense. There's different laws in every state. I'm not going to get into all those on this podcast, but what I'm ultimately saying is, but you can certainly give a gift to somebody. You can certainly give a gift. And so what I'm saying is, how do you get somebody? And so let me pull back on that. How do you get someone to then talk? So it's like a whole, by the way, we could do a whole 10 podcast series on how do you get somebody else to then refer you? Well, one of the things you can do is put something in their hands that gives them some social capital, some clout, for instance. And this is not, I'm going to pull away from dental for a sec, okay? But I'm now the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to drive people into my spa. And I believe once they come into my spa that they're going to have this amazing experience, right?
Yeah.
So for a limited time only, I'm going to allow you, by the way, this Ritz-Carlton spa for this example is member only.
Exclusive.
It's exclusive. It's member only. And for a limited time, you're able to bring one friend. One friend. So, did I just give her social capital?
Yes.
Yes, because now she's got.
Yeah.
Then
you have friends fighting to get into that
you go.
opportunity, and then that's how you create buzz.
There you go. So now what's happening is she's all of a sudden, now by the way, is she going to bring somebody to my Ritz-Carlton Reserve private experience, membership only, but for a limited time we're going to invite somebody in experience? Is that going to happen? Is she going to bring somebody?
Yeah.
Is she going to talk about my spa? Yes. Is she going to use it? And here's what ends up going to happen, by the way. She's going to say, I've got a secret. Like, I don't want to tell everybody, which ultimately everybody tells everybody, because then that's another way to basically gain friends and win influence. There's a thing back on Friends where back in the day, Chandler tells secrets, and then I think they look at him and they're like, what the heck? And Chandler goes,
I can't handle secrets.
No, he goes, I tell secrets so people will like me. And I remember that part, right? And so it was like, so what ends up happening is, and I want you to think about this in that context, is that it gives somebody, and I think you need to think about that when you start thinking about referrals. Like, it gives somebody social capital. So then what ends up happening is saying, okay, I could create a campaign going back to my current patients, creating some exclusivity around the offer, okay? And then when I create exclusivity around that offer, then I can invite them to invite people to that offer, which means they will go to the marketplace and then recruit for me. So, I could give 100 examples on this podcast, but I ultimately think you should use the example I just gave, which is like, you have to be creative within your own resources, but to say, like, first of all, you can't listen to this podcast, put it down and go, well, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
You got to go like sit around with your team. If you have an outside marketing company you work with, work with them. If you got to stop and get everyone in a room and say, let's be creative. How do we go back to our current patient base and create something? Do we need to create an event? You know, it's interesting. So right now, dermatology is kind of interesting because it kind of gets into, it's starting to move in a lot of ways cosmetic. I don't know if most people know that, but like dermatologists, they're kind of flirting that like boundary of like cosmetic surgeon versus dermatologist. And so what they do is they'll have like these one night events, right? Car dealerships do this too, by the way.
Yeah.
They'll do like the grand revealing of the new Porsche 911.
And they use exclusivity. We only have 3 on the lot. And you can only see the 3. And if you're the first 3 to show up, then you get to buy the...
So what ends up happening is people, and you say, well, that sounds really hard for a dental practice. No, it's not. No, it's not. It doesn't. Look, you could use whitening. You could use a cosmetic service. You could use, certain cases. You could do honestly, you could do an event that, I mean, you could. There's so many ways. You've got to be creative.
And take advantage of the time period too. I mean, we're coming into the fall. There's all kinds of holidays. I mean, you got Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. You know, there's ways to get people into your practice, and it's how do you get them to go tell other people about it.
You could even do it. You could even use charity. I mean, you could say, look, we're trying to do a fundraiser. And you should, by the way, don't do it because you just want patients. I mean, do it for the right reasons. But you could ultimately do a fundraiser and say, look, we're going to raise money for this charity or this business who's been affected by COVID. And ultimately speaking, what we want to do is every blank that, every other person comes in, we're going to donate X amount. By the way, you see this all the time, right? Yep. If you come in or you bring a guest, for every guest you bring in, we're going to donate $100 to the local blank. Yes. You have to actually get like really geared up around this. Talking to a bunch of negative people who are also sitting in the same boat isn't going to do shit to get you there. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just not. So ultimately speaking, what you have to do is go, okay, how do we build a campaign to get people excited? First of all, I would go to the people that know, like, and trust me. And then I would figure out how to get them to invite their friends. How do we get them to invite their friends? We give them something that allows them to go get people. And if we do, and there, by the way, there's a lot of ways to do this. But what ends up happening by doing that, then we can create in a massive surge of patients. By the way, I would have these internal marketing campaigns like in the bag. And let me give you an example of what I mean. There's a company, a small little company, that does this every now and then. It's called McDonald's, okay? And McDonald's, even though it's a different campaign, I want you to think about this. Like McDonald's, every now and then they need a revenue boost, and they drop in a Monopoly game. Right? And most people don't know this, but sales go up at McDonald's like 20% when they run one of those campaigns. Now, McDonald's doesn't run them all the time. Because if they did run it all the time, it wouldn't create scarcity, right? And
I actually, the McRib.
I'll tell you about the McRib. I don't know if I told you this story. You should.
I don't think you did.
Oh my God, this is good. So I was hearing this. I'm such a geek. I spend so much time listening to business stuff. So the McRib, I got to tell you about the McRib.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is kind of a cool thing. So the McRib, believe it or not, was the answer to the chicken nugget. All right. So here's
chicken
I know,
nugget.
the McChicken nugget, or what do you call them? I don't know. I don't eat them. I don't think
McChicken.
Whatever they're called. I wouldn't be here probably if I did eat them. So I think they make you sick pretty quick. But if you think about this for a second, so what happened is in 1979, I think I got my year right. McDonald's releases the McChicken nugget or whatever thing it is. And so when they released those, the truth was demand was through the roof. And because no one really, if you think about back at that time, no one really had chicken nuggets.
No.
They weren't really a fast food item, and fast food wasn't what it is
It wasn't
today.
a thing that you would get freezer. It's a freezer bag.
Right. I mean,
You just got it out of the freezer.
And so this company creates the chicken nugget. So then you're like, okay, man, this is freaking awesome, right? I can go get my chicken nuggets or whatever at McDonald's.
Yeah.
They ran out of them, and the supply chain couldn't get them there quick enough. So they come up, and finally, one of the marketing guys is down in, I think he was in South Carolina, and he comes across this. He just got an eating barbecue, and he was like, man, what if we created like the McRib? Yeah. Now, if you know anything about the McRib, there's no rib meat. I think it's like inside of the stomach and whatever else it is, but it doesn't matter. The truth is they launched it. So what they were going to do was bring in the McRib, because people were getting upset they couldn't get the chicken nugget. So that was the answer McDonald's had, was we'll bring in this McRib. Well, ultimately it was a failure.
Yeah.
And people don't know that. It was a flop. Nobody bought it. It didn't do well. So they pulled it away. They pulled it back from all the stores and didn't do well. And then, somewhere along the line, they released it. Boom, scarcity.
Yeah.
And sales went through the roof. So they pulled it back again. And then what ended up happening, by the way, Disney does a great job of this too, by the way. So what ends up happening is they pull back this McRib, and then they start like just releasing it in a few cities.
Yep.
And then they start noticing it goes up, right? And then all of a sudden, before you know it, by the way, there's an app. Someone told me, I've not checked, but there's an app on the phone that you can go find McRibs or whatever.
Yeah, there's an app for all of it. I mean, they had the same conversation that you're having. I read an article recently about these. They were like 20-something-year-old kids that were in Canada, and they heard about there being a pizza from McDonald's. They had little pizzas, and they traveled from Canada all the way across, I think down to Florida or something, to get one location had the pizza. So they traveled all the way there just to get a McDonald's pizza. How weird that sounds, but same conversation you're having about the McRib. It's crazy.
It sounds kind of fun, actually.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
a little road trip for a McDonald's pizza.
But isn't that interesting, right? So we think about this. And like I said, Disney. So now McDonald's knows, right? And you'll see the campaign. It says McRib for a limited time, right? Disney does a great thing with their vault, right? And I don't know how Disney Plus is affected by that now. Maybe the subscription makes up for it. But Disney did a great job of taking movies that were 60 years old and releasing them from the vault for a period of time.
Yep.
Viewership would go up, and as viewership would go up, then they'd, at some point they'd pull it back into the vault, right? You had to go watch it now, or it'd be back in the vault. So the dental office is no different. Even though we start thinking like, well, what the heck does that do in my dental practice? The truth is everything. That you can actually look at cyclical models within your business, and you can start saying, look, I've got to create a campaign that I know what if we start tracking revenues, and we could, by the way, most people don't do this, but you could grab your P&L and you could look through the 12-month, and you could do this year after year after year, and you could overlay the years. Okay. So you could do 2020, 2019, 2018, 17, 16. Some people would go back to 1981, right? We could overlay the years, and we would see trend lines. And so we could say, okay, shoot, this is what happens every year about this time. And then what we could do is, once we knew our cash conversion cycle, in a sense, we could overlay. So we could say, okay, every time I do one of these campaigns, for these internal marketing campaigns, it takes me, on average, 21 days for the calls to roll in. And then revenues pop in at this point. So I know when I drop this money in this campaign, 42 days later, we tend to have a big spike in revenue. Yeah. Just making up that number. So we can start predicting around it. So it's, in a sense, this is a great time for you to start putting something like that in place. The urgency around something like this, like, it won't happen unless there's an urgency. That's why I say things happen for us, not to us, because it's like, ultimately speaking, because of what's happening, you're going to go back and you're going to say, okay, I got to figure out, I can't put up with this anymore. Like, I don't want to do this again. And then we start creating campaigns internally. We look at what is our offering. And if you say to yourself, well, I don't have any offering, well, then you have a whole nother, then you're a commodity. And my assumption is, if you're listening to this podcast and you can't think of anything original for your business, that's probably why you're taking tons of insurance companies and you can't get out of them, because you're too commoditized, which is another conversation. But we look at this and we say, okay, so there is an option here. The option is, what do you do that's unique? How do you go back to the people we know, like, and trust? And then how do you give them something and put something in their hands that they're able to give to another person, who then incentivizes them to come to your business? By doing that, whether it's a one-night event, whether it's a 30-day long campaign, whether it's for limited time only, scarcity drives demand. It's the number one rule of economics. And we ultimately know that if we go do that. Now, it's the timing of this message, by the way. If it was August or maybe even July when we were having this message, I would probably start building up some external marketing campaign and external assets too. Okay. I'm saying what I'm saying because of what it is, right? Yeah. Because of the fact that we're about to be in October, and this will probably be released like October, I don't know exactly the date, but October 1st-ish. So because of that, I have to go, all right, well, if that's the case, then we've got to think about this thing a little bit different. And so then I got to go, boom, how do I mobilize revenues tomorrow? How do I mobilize revenues? Okay, so then I go, okay, so now let me move on to the next piece of this, which is this idea of, okay, if we do that, then the next question is, and this is where the mistake, you and I both know this is the mistake that will come in, is people will go back and say, all right, I'm going to go figure all this out. I got this. They'll get excited and they'll be like, okay, I listen to this podcast and this Eric guy.
I'm motivated now.
and they'll be like, I'm going to handle it all myself. No, like that's the mistake. So, it's who, right? Who can help me? Whether it's Tower Leadership, or it's an outside marketing company, whether it's people on your team, who can I put together who can help me with this? Who is the person who can help me? And so what happens, we go, all right, how am I going to get all this done? Well, you won't get it done.
Yeah.
So ultimately then you say, okay, who can help me? What company, what individuals, how can I go get the capabilities to help me create this? And by doing that, not only will you solve this problem, which is temporary. By the way, I think people overreact anyhow. I mean, if your business is halfway, productive, the phone call, you already have half of October filled already.
Yeah.
Okay. It will get filled. Okay. But ultimately speaking, it still showed a mirror in your systems, and the mirror that's held up is this mirror of I've got to figure out in the future how to overcome this.
Yeah.
And if in a sense then I figure out how to overcome this, that won't happen to me in the future, or I can, when I see it coming, I know what to do, which means I'll have the capabilities in the future to go put that in place. And then it's the same thing as I explain what McDonald's does. It's the same thing. Because when they're looking at certain things, they know when to drop things. They know when to drop campaigns. So does the Ritz-Carlton, and so do other places. They know when it is to drop the campaigns, because they know when they typically have a revenue dump or a revenue decline, and they do it before the revenue decline to stabilize revenues. And whether you do it because of October being 6 months from COVID, or you do it because it's January, you still got to do it. So it's a great practice and discipline around your business, and it's a great time to go
ultimately
after it.
speaking, I mean, you tell the clients, you want to get predictable. So you want to be able to, every time you put $1 in, you know what comes out of it.
Exactly.
So ultimately what you're trying to do is just get a predictability. I mean,
That's
once you get the statistics on your side, then you can use that. So October's coming up and the calendar's halfway full. All I need to do is drop this campaign. Boom. So for the listeners that are tuning in for this podcast, what actionable steps? So, all right, they just listened to this podcast. What is, do they wait till, I don't know, this might come out on a Tuesday or Thursday. Do they wait till the next week and in their morning huddle, they bring in their leadership team and they discuss this? Or what would you say is the best next steps for these doctors to take?
The first thing I would say is that quit hanging around all the people that are talking about October. Okay. I'm serious. I mean, I'm dead serious about that. Like, stop it. Stop it hanging out with them. They don't know what to do. Stop asking them for advice. It will mess up your mindset. It'll mess up your ability to solve this problem. Stop it. So quit hanging out with them. Quit talking to them about this problem. They don't know how to solve it. Look, ultimately, you could reach out to a company like Tower Leadership. We'll be more than happy to help you put solutions to solve this. But yeah, I would absolutely get my team together. I would mobilize. That's what happens as a business owner. You say, okay, we got a problem. All right. So this I was listening to this podcast, and this guy was talking about, hey, we need to create an internal marketing campaign. I would go back and look at what my unique services are that I have to offer. How do I create a scarcity model around it, which means a shortened timeline or for a limited number of people? I would absolutely have the people that I reach out to be able to invite a friend, being able to invite somebody to that. And then I would go to social media, which is the most inexpensive way to launch it. And I would go there. If I'd have to go to emails, I would do it there. If I had to just send, look, mail for most people within their area of patients is 1 day turnaround.
Yeah.
I would do mailings. I might do emails. I might do phone calls. I might do, like, how serious of this is a problem? If it's a serious problem, get to work. So if it's a serious problem, make phone calls. It means sending out emails. It means doing marketing. If you own a billboard that's digital, change out your digital billboard. Doing the things right away. Create a cool, invitation that you can open up that is a special invite only. Look, if it's people say, well, it will fix your calendar. Yeah. And so what ultimately happens is say, I'm trying to give you solutions that are not every day. Certainly we can go reactivate hygiene and get people in there. Certainly, there's probably people on a waiting list. Certainly, those are the things that we all know we need to be doing anyhow.
This is just one of the many.
I'm just giving you a thought, right? I'm just giving you, hey, look, there's some unique things you need to be trying right now so that you know how to do them in the future. And then the idea of marketing, like McDonald's Corporation did not think of their marketing campaign for Monopoly. Ultimately, a company out of Jacksonville ended up doing that campaign and brought it to them. So like, yeah, go get the dang capabilities. Like, go find. You don't have to create all this stuff from thin air. There's companies that will help you do this.
Insource or outsource. We talk about it all the time.
You might have the ability within your team to think of the ideas and think of something creative to go get a whole bunch of patients. Because let's go back. Okay, so let's just say that you have 3,000 patients. If you went back to 3,000 active patients, you're going to tell me that you can't create a campaign to go get 100 new patients? Yeah. Of course you can. Of course you can. If and so it's chicken feed. It's not that hard, right? Because if all 3,000 people referred you a person, that would be 3,000 new patients, which you're not going to get that kind of response rate. But if you did, And
I think ultimately people they a lot of times they get sold this idea of you just do this one thing and it'll get you a ton of patients. And what you're talking about ultimately is you got to keep doing a lot of things. It's not always going to be, you put money in, you do a direct mail, and what we see and what we have conversations with all the time is the doctor do like a flyer campaign, and that's the only thing they're doing. So just like you mentioned, you got to do the flyers, you got to do the emails, you got to do the phone calls, you got to be out in the marketplace. There's a lot of things that go into it, but ultimately speaking, how big is the problem? How much time are you willing to put in? And do you insource it or outsource it? I mean, it's just like that.
It really is that simple. I think we overcomplicate things. And I think we overcomplicate things because the doctor's in the chair all day long. And if you're in the chair all day long, it's really hard to figure all this stuff in place. So then ultimately speaking, you say, do I need to outsource it? Do I need to hire a company to handle this? Can I insource it? Do I have some people to break off? Maybe you're undermanned right now. Maybe you need to bring in somebody who can help you with this. So those are look, this too shall pass. Okay. Yes. I think you've got to think of it more of like, how do I learn from this? How do I get from this? How do I become better from this? How do I create better systems? How do I look at this in the future? Look, it is 2020. You have got to be, if you're in dental, you've got to be a marketing company. Those days are over. The days of just popping up a sign and sitting back and watching are over. You have got to be advanced. You've got to have a high business acumen. You got to know what you're doing. This is a business. The people that want to sit back and just file insurance claims are done. Their days are numbered. They will not be here in 20 years. Those days are done. And it's not, hey, look, I didn't drive this ship. Don't get mad at me. I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm telling you, private equity and sophistication, around this business and DSOs is changing the model. It's changing the marketplace. And if you don't know how to compete, you're going to get lost. So, it's one of the reasons why we do the foundation workshop is to bring in people and teach them how to compete in this type of time. And so people need to reach out to companies like Tower Leadership or, whomever. If you got a company that can help you with this, great. Yeah. But ultimately speaking, you've got to have the business acumen right now to be able to do this. And so I think that's the most important thing. So, my message would be, look, get after it. Get after it. I mean, this is an amazing time. I want to let you know as we wrap up this podcast, I'm close to 40 minutes in. Glad that you joined us. And Matthew, thanks. Yeah,
thanks for having me. It's been a whirlwind. Welcome back.
Welcome back. So, by the way, I love that promo. And heck, some of you might have watched because of that promo. But I ultimately want to tell you this. Look, this is like any other problem, right? When we have a problem, we look at it and we say, look, what are the obstacles I'm facing? How do I overcome those? Like, what's really holding me back from being able to do that? What's the timeline? Who's involved? And I'm solving those for you today on this podcast, is basically saying, look, you can't keep doing the same thing. You can't just hang out with people and cry about it and those people. And look, I'm not trying to be negative, but it's true. I've listened to the chatter, and then I've got the doctors who are making things happen. You can be on the chatter side, or you can be making things happen. Yes, you need to go back and do a lot of the other things you need to do, like going after a recall. Yes, you need to go make sure appointment retention's really high this month and cancellation policies. Yes, you got to go make sure you're putting your outside marketing campaigns and those are effective and working right now, and probably increase our budget. If you're ever doing those, you should be increasing the budget. You should be somewhere between 3 to 10% of total revenue should be going to marketing. If you're not doing that, go do it. When? Yesterday. now, like, get all over it. Quit being, all you're doing is costing yourself money. If you listen to 3 podcasts ago, I explained the reason why. Get after it, put the money in marketing, increase the budget, and then create an internal campaign. Internal campaigns are part of what makes something so cool, because dental is intimate. It's an intimate relationship. And because of that intimate relationship, people are more likely to refer you because they know, like, and trust you. They trust you in a way that, most people will never get trusted. And you've got to lean into that relationship, say, since you trust me, would you be willing to refer me to this person? But you've got to give them a reason to refer you. If you just ask for referrals, that doesn't give them any some social capital to, in a sense, say, look, I can only invite one friend and I'd love to invite you. So be creative around that. If you need solutions, we're here to help, but ultimately it's about getting things done. Look, you got to look at something like this. And like you said, Matthew, put the time aside, get focused on it, get your team together, walk in the door, and guys, make it happen. This week, make it happen. Mobilize, get your team together, get focused. And if we can help you, let us know as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hey, always remember, share this with a friend, share it with somebody. I think this is going to be literally one of our biggest months ever. The numbers are through the roof, and that's thanks to all of you watching and listening out there. One of the things I always tell you is I think it's a great thing to do is share this with a friend, talk about it. These are great conversations to sit down with a friend and share this type of concept. Brainstorm together. Look, teams do a better job than individuals. Sit down have an abundance mindset, which means don't worry that your friend might also create a good campaign. Maybe it's a friend in a different city. Sit down together and say, hey, look, okay, so I was listening to this guy, Eric. He was talking about this. Let's think through some ideas together, brainstorm together, be strategic, work together in teams, listen to this podcast and make actionable steps and make this stuff happen. Share it, like it. Hey, I appreciate you guys being here as always. It means the world to me. This podcast was only created to serve. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.